How y'all doing this morning? You good? All right, good. How many Bulldog fans do we have in the room? Oh, we had a good night last night, I'm telling you. I just want to make sure you're good and awake this morning. Now then, I want to recognize someone today because you notice the flags out front. And of course, it's Veterans Day, and there's been a lot of celebration of our veterans. And I know that we have a lot of veterans that are a part of Piedmont Church or visiting today. So all of our veterans, would you please stand at this time? All of our veterans, come on, veterans. Here we go. Man, we appreciate y'all. Up through the balcony on the main floor. That's awesome. Thank you so much for serving your country. We appreciate you. My dad was a veteran of World War II. He served in the Philippines, and he was in the Army, and that's how I came about my name. My full name is Dwight Ike Arthur Reighard. So I was named after Dwight Eisenhower, so I got Dwight Ike there. And then I picked up Arthur from Douglas MacArthur since my dad was in the Philippines. And that's how I came about my name. Two of my uncles were career military, and so I was raised with a great appreciation for our military, the sacrifice, the service that you make, and we just appreciate you so much. So congratulations on your weekend where we recognize you. Now, for those of you who've not been here recently, we are in a series right now in the book of Nehemiah. We're kind of coming up to the end of it, and it's not lost on me that we've been studying Nehemiah longer than it took him to actually rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But that's what happens when you give a preacher the opportunity to be able to do something, right? And I love the story of Nehemiah. It's got so many applications for our life today. If you're trying to rebuild your life, if you're trying to maybe start a career and to do things there, how do you appeal to those in authority? How do you deal with critics in your life? How do you get people on board? How do you create a compelling vision? All of those things are found in the book of Nehemiah. And that's why it's just a great leadership book for anyone that wants to know, how do you go about building something or even rebuilding something as Nehemiah was attempting to do. And so today, kind of the punchline, we're going to be in chapter number 6, and the punchline is found in verse 15 because it says, "And the wall was completed on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. So again, we've been studying him longer than it took him to be able to rebuild the walls. And as we do this, why was it and what was his secret? Why was he able to do what he did? And if you really came down to it, you could just simply say this: he refused to quit. He refused to quit. There were a lot of reasons why he could have quit, and we're going to look at 3 of those key reasons today that he could have just turned around and walked away because of things that he was dealing with, but he didn't. He had that persistence gene, that gene that just, he had to keep going because he had something called a compelling vision. And that's what we all need in our life, is we need a compelling vision, because then it gives us a clear perspective on how to go about things and how to deal with things that we're going to be facing in our life and we're going to face in different seasons of our life. It's not like we just have faced adversity in one season and all of a sudden it's gone. We can face adversity in multiple seasons in our life, and how you deal with it and how you rebuild is so vitally important. So Nehemiah gets this vision. And he gets the vision because he talks to a man by the name of Hananiah, and we studied that on the very first day we started this series. And Hananiah had been to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was a shattered city. There were terrible things that had gone on. Their walls had been torn down, their gates had been burned with fire. fire. And for people today, that might not create as clear a picture as it did for Nehemiah, but basically what it was saying was the city of Jerusalem is a sitting duck. They just get run over, they get taken over, they have no way of protecting themselves. And then Hananiah added in, not just is it affecting them from a physical perspective, but it's affecting them from a mental perspective and also from a spiritual perspective. Because he said they feel like they are under reproach. He said they are in distress. And the word there for distress means they feel like they're getting it from every side. Do you ever sometimes feel that way about life? You know, you just feel like everything is coming at you at once. It's like that story that Jesus tells about the two builders, and one of them, you know, built on the rock and one of them built on the sand. But he describes the same perspective there, because he says, you know, the rain came down and the floods came up and the winds blew. It was like from every side of their life, they were being assaulted. And that's what Nehemiah was hearing from Hananiah. And when he said they feel like they're under reproach, that was an interesting word, and it was basically saying we feel like God has forgotten us. We feel like God has just walked away from us. And so Nehemiah in that moment is going to watch his life change. And here's what I want you to know today. Your life can change in a moment as well. It can be a conversation that changes the entire trajectory of your life. It can be a situation, a circumstance that you face, and all of a sudden your life is going to take on brand new dimensions. There are going to be new challenges. There's going to be new opportunities. And you need to be able to get a vision, because a vision is what gives you the ability to be able to have persistence when persecution comes and all kinds of difficulties come. See, I can still remember the conversation that I had. I've had several with God through my life where my entire life changed. And I felt like I truly heard the voice of God. And there's not been many of those times, as I'm approaching now, not too far away from having 50 years in ministry. There's been those times, though, when I felt like God just really spoke to me. And one of them was when I accepted the call into ministry. And I can remember that day, and I never shall forget the feeling that went through me as I'm sitting on the hood of my car. I'm in a quiet place, and I'm sitting there and I'm praying because I wanted to know what God wanted to do with my life. I'm in my early 20s. I'm trying to figure all of that out. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't grow up with this background, but I become a Christian. And after becoming a Christian, then God really began to work on my heart. And he does it in stages, you know. The first group that I ever got to speak to in my life was a group called the Eager Beavers. And the Eager Beavers was a mission organization. It was a part of GAs and RAs and things like that. For those you grew up in a Baptist world, you know what I'm talking about. So they had Eager Beavers on Sunday nights, and basically you were supposed to be babysitting the kids in the church, and that's the group that they gave me to work with first. So while the adults were in the worship center, I was with this group of children. And so I developed my preaching technique, I didn't know I was, as a mere way of being able to survive a room with about 35 children. And that was, I started telling stories. But here was the cool part. I was still such a new Christian that I'm reading these stories in the Old Testament, and I'm wondering, has anybody else read this stuff? Because this is really cool. I mean, that thing about David and Goliath, and so you're trying to teach a bunch of children, you're going to act it out with those kids. And had no idea that I was creating a narrative style of preaching. I'm not what you would call a hermeneutical preacher in the classic style of how you do things. I'm a storyteller. And I had no idea then that that was the group that was going to help me to define my calling. And then our youth minister left to go to seminary. And as he leaves to go to seminary, they didn't have anyone to teach the teenagers. And that was the next group that I started working with. And then I felt like God was calling me into the ministry. But I had to settle that issue. I had to know, is this just something that I'm thinking up? Is this just something, that I kind of, believe? Or do I really, really believe this? And being able to get a word from God on the front end saves you a great deal of heartache in the middle and on the back end. Because even if you're called by God, there's going to be those difficult times. And so I accepted the calling, and I became a janitor and a youth director. I'm still one of the best janitors you've ever seen in your life. Son, I can clean a toilet bowl and never break the rhythm. I mean, I can go at it. I can vacuum with the best of them. And that was the role that God called me to. I made $80.82 a week, and I started college. Because someone said, if God called you to preach, then God has also called you to prepare. And so I started college and started working in that role. I was the interim. I was the interim as a youth minister. I've been the interim in just about every role that I've ever had in life. I was never somebody's maybe first choice, but once I got the opportunity, then I had the privilege to be able to prove myself in that opportunity. And that comes back to a word called persistence. See, I don't care what role you're in. And maybe right now you're in a job where you're going, they're really not taking, my skill set and talents and all of that and really utilizing it the right way. So here's something I would tell you. If you want to be able to move up, always do more than they're paying you to do, and eventually they'll pay you more to do what you're going to do, all right? But even if it's the worst place you've ever been, do the best job you've ever done, because God will move you, and He moves you along in amazing ways. And so for me, understanding that calling on my life, because there's been times that I've gone through things where if I did not know in the absolute core of my being that this is what God has called me to do, I would have maybe given up and maybe walked away. In other words, I would have quit. And that's the thing that Nehemiah does not do. He does not quit. He didn't quit when they were only halfway through getting the job done. And that's always the most difficult time in our life, is when we're only halfway there and everything gets overwhelming and there's just as much to do that's already been done. Nehemiah had that gene that kept him going at it until he was going to get finished. And then I've had those times when everything in my world collapsed, and losing a wife and a child. And it was God speaking to my heart one day, and I know exactly the spot where I was, and I remember exactly what the Lord said to me. And part of what He said to me was, Ike, you trust me. You go preach and you trust me. And I did what God told me to do. And at a time in my life when I was trying to find my way, and if you've ever gone through, a job ending and you've not got the next place that you're going, and you're caught in kind of that time that's so difficult, I can remember God speaking to my heart in that moment. I was away praying, I was away fasting, and about, God, what do you want me to do next? And as clear as a bell in my spirit, you're gonna start a church. It's gonna be called North Star. Your concept is gonna be for heaven's sake. That's why you're doing this church. And it was clear and it was compelling, because there are those times when you don't know what to do. Marlon Longacre down here on the front was with me when we started that, and Marlon said one of the saddest pictures he ever remembers of my life is that, you know, I'd been at New Hope, which is a great church, a tremendous church. Some of my friends are here from there today, and I love that church with all of my heart. And I've been at First Baptist Church of Atlanta, and I've been in some of these great places, and we're starting North Star, and we had to start it at not a Holiday Inn, but just Days Inn Conference Center is where we had to start it. See, that's how great my memory is, right? And there wasn't a place for me to have a quiet spot before the service, so I went into the janitor's closet, which had a door that went outside, and they didn't have a chair, and I'd turned a mop bucket upside down, and I was sitting on the mop bucket looking outside on January the 5th, 1997, when Marlon found me. He said it was the saddest picture I've ever seen in my life. Didn't know whether you were going to run out the back door or whether you were going to come in. Well, we started that church that day. We had 365 people show up the first day. I mean, it's like God said, I'm going to give you somebody for every day of the year. And God has so blessed that church. And man, you know, at New Hope, they have a great pastor named Reese Stinner that's leading that church, and they're doing more than they've ever done before. And over at North Star, Mike Lynch is doing an amazing job there. And so I've been blessed to be around these kinds of things. Were there difficult days? Yeah, there were difficult days. Were there days when things were overwhelming? Absolutely they were. But when you have a compelling vision, it keeps you going, because the devil has a method to make you stop. You ready to see what it is so you'll know how to counteract him? Here we go. Nehemiah chapter 6, beginning in verse number 1. Now, when it was reported, these are the enemies of Nehemiah. When it was reported to Sanballat and to Tobiah and to Geshem the Arab and to the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall and that no breach remained in it, although at that time, he says kind of parenthetically, I had not set up the doors in the gates, then Sanballat and Geshem sent a message to me, and they said, come, let us meet together at Shephram, which is in the plain of Ono. That's about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. But he says, they were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them. And listen, if you're into tattoos, because I know people like ink, you want to get this inked on your arm or across your chest, all right? I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. I'm doing too great of a work to come down to your level, is what he was saying. And he said, I knew that they were trying to do this, and he said, so why should the work stop while I leave it and I come down to you? The first tactic of the devil is always to distract you, to distract me, to get us divided in our hearts and in our minds, to get us going in multiple directions. Because when you become that way, you can't accomplish anything great. And notice what he said again, I'm doing a great work. All of us need a great work. We need a work worth living for. We need a work worth dying for. We need something in our life that's a compelling vision, and it keeps us going, and it keeps us knocking out things. The other night, I had the privilege of going to a dinner. One of my co-workers, Angela Phelps, was recognized as one of the Atlanta Business Chronicle's most influential women. And Alana Shepard, who started the Shepard Clinic because she had a child that became paralyzed, came back to Atlanta with her child and started Shepherd's Clinic. And I don't know exactly how old she is, but she's a bit older than I am, and she is still just killing it. Man, she was energetic as she talked about what the future is going to be like for the Shepherd Clinic. And she found something in the midst of heartache. I mean, her child had been paralyzed. Instead of just going, oh me and woe's me, instead she takes that heartache and she turns it into something now that has impacted so many different people. So, you know, you've got to have a great work. And so he says this literatively, and I believe figuratively. And Tony Brown, it may be a metaphor. You're smarter on this stuff than I am as a Shakespearean actor. But he says, physically, I'm literally not going to come down off of a wall. So literally, I'm not coming down off of the wall. But metaphorically, he was saying, I've got this work that's much greater than hearing you with all of your criticism. And I will not come down to your level. Do not let people pull you down to their level. And listen, when you've got people that are critics and you've got somebody that's ripping you to shreds, you do understand that's a weakness in their character. Never allow another person's weakness to override your strengths. Don't allow people to do that to you. And so they're trying to get him to come down, but he's got it in his mind, I'm doing too great a work. So then he says, so why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? He knew this as a leader. If I drop down to that level, then the work is going to stop, and the work is too important to stop. Now then, they changed their tactics a bit. They sent messages to me, Nehemiah says, 4 times in this manner. 4 different times they come to distract him, and he won't get distracted. I answered them the same way. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me in the same manner a 5th time, but here's the difference on the 5th time. This time he has an open letter in his hand. So what I'm going to read to you now was what was written in this letter from the enemies of Nehemiah to Nehemiah. It's reported among the nations, and Gazmu says, folks, you're always going to have a Gazmu in your life. There's always going to be that person who is a tattletale. They are a gossip. They're going to run their mouth. They're going to doubt your motives. There's always going to be those people. That's like, you know, as a leader, I'll have people say, well, you know, they said, and I'll go, who are they? Who are they? My mother taught me that because my mother had a little saying, they said and don't you tell are the 2 biggest liars in the county. You ever had somebody say, well, they said, now don't you go tell anybody. Those are the kind of people that will just lie to you. And here's the lie. It's been reported among the nations that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. And therefore, that's why you're rebuilding the wall. And are you to be their king according to these reports? And you've also now appointed prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you. So now they're bringing religion into it. They're bringing in, first of all, that he is being rebellious toward King Artaxerxes that sent him there to the city. So now then, not just am I going to try to distract you, but now I'm going to defame you. I'm going to lie about you. I'm going to slander you. I'm going to question your motives. I'm going to go through all of these things. By the way, when you are in marriage problems, this is exactly what you do to each other. This is exactly what you do. You distract each other. You argue about things and you go, well, you always do this. I don't always do that. And then you start arguing about semantics and then you defame each other. Well, you know, you're this and you're that. And you get into all the name calling and all the other things that you do in life, and you just destroy each other. And so he goes on and he says, so you've appointed those prophets concerning you, that they're saying a king is in Judah. So he said, you've got the religious people tied to the political people because you want to be their king. And now it will be reported to the king on these reports. In other words, I'm going to go to the principal and I'm going to turn you in. I'm going to absolutely go there and turn you in. So now then he gives him an option. Now that I've made my threat, let me kind of tell you how we can work this out. So come now, let us take counsel together. In other words, don't make us do this. Don't make us go to King Ahasuerus and tell him what we believe that you're trying to do. So then I sent a message to him. So he says, this is what you go back and you tell Sanballat. Such things as you are saying have not been done, but you are inventing them in your own mind. Never allow another person's weakness to override your strength. And then he gives you the reason why they were doing this. For all of them were trying to frighten us. And they thought they're going to become discouraged with the work and it will not be done. So what does Nehemiah do? He turns around and he prays a prayer for the very thing that they're saying is not going to happen. They say about him, the workers' hands are getting weak. The workers' hands are getting weak. Look at what Nehemiah prays. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. Strengthen my hands. So what do you do in life? You got to keep going in spite of distractions. You don't give in to the peace conferences and all the other things that they say are taking place. If you've got a great project, just say, I am not going to come down. I'm not going to be distracted until the time that that wall is finished. You realize this is why so many churches never accomplish anything, because they're always trying to appoint a committee to do something. You do know that a camel is a horse put together by a committee, and they just stick a couple of extra lumps in there, and you've never seen a statue ever erected to a committee. You don't need a committee when you know what the work is. He said, but here's what I do. They were scheming to harm me. He was very discerning. When you have distractions, hear me out, hear me out. When distractions come, pray for God to give you discernment, to be able to see things the way that God sees things. So here's what he knew. If I go out there in the plane of oh no, it could really be oh no, because they might assassinate me there, they might kidnap me there, people are going to see me turn around and walk away, they're going to wonder, are we ever going to be able to complete this project? It's going to delay it. So he says, why then would I come down? So in American management, a few years back, they kind of came up with this little saying, and it really is a leadership law. The main thing is to keep the main thing, right? The main thing is you keep the main thing, and you keep working in spite of defamation. When people begin to slander you, anytime you set big goals, it's going to be criticized, it's going to be slandered. I promise you. If we decided tomorrow to build a new building on our property, if we decided tomorrow to expand our parking lots, I promise you there are going to be people who will oppose it, who don't go to church here, who have no idea what we do here, but there's going to be people that oppose it. That's part of human nature, it almost seems like, especially in the days that we are in. And when you set big goals, you're setting yourself up for people to come against you. Again, here's a great tattoo, and here's a great Twitter moment, all right? To the degree that God is going to use you, the devil's going to attempt to destroy you, and people will forgive you for everything but success. And I'm telling you, sometimes it's the people that are going to be the closest to you. I'm going to show you how that works out in this story in just a second. The most criticized man, the most misunderstood motives of any man that has ever lived upon this earth was Jesus Christ. And in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 10, he said, blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. Go Google the news story from this past week. It's the story of a city council, I think it's in Minnesota someplace. They've outlawed any of their employees from using any decorations around this time of year that involve the colors red and green. Somehow they think red and green is indicative of it being a Christian celebration. I'm telling you, we are living in a day, you mark my word, there will be days that parents who want to adopt children will not be allowed to adopt children if they're going to raise them in a Christian home. I guarantee you it's coming. And you're seeing it, and I'm seeing it. And we've watched what's going on with Hamas and what took place over there in Gaza and the murderers that came over and slaughtered people. And to think that we have protests in this country in favor of what took place there is mind-boggling to me. But you're seeing it, and I'm seeing it. And we're watching it each and every day, beginning in January. I'm going to be doing a series there. Heaven, hell, and everything in between. What should you expect? You're either on your way to heaven or you're on your way to hell. And there's no time out, and there's no purgatory, and there's no in between. Trust me. And what's going to happen in between times? I'm watching my friends that are Palestinians, and I'm watching my friends that are Jewish over in the Holy Land, and they are going through so much heartache. They're going through so much difficulty right now. I'm just telling you, the defamation, the way we slander people, the false stories that are told, it's incredible what's happening. So it's a way to sidetrack people. And always remember, the name Satan means slanderer. I mean, it's literally what the name Satan means. They're going to slander us. And he said they were trying to frighten us because they thought our hands are going to get too weak for the work and it's not going to be completed. So he prayed and said, God, strengthen my hands. And if you're going to be a leader, you got to realize first, there are going to be things that are going to come and try to distract you and get you off course. There's going to be people who are going to defame you and say terrible things against you. And you can spend your time fighting criticism, or you can keep working on your wall, your life, whatever it is that you're doing. Nehemiah said, I'm going to keep working on the wall. I refuse to be frightened. So now then, they amp it up. If I can't distract you, if slandering you, defaming you doesn't stop you, and thanks to Rick Warren for this great outline, then you have to keep working in spite of the danger. So let me tell you, if you're going to be a leader, you're going to be a super achiever, you have to keep working in spite of danger. They tried to sidetrack him. Let's have a conference. They tried to slander him. You're just doing this for your own benefit. And then they tried to scare him. And here's how they did it. I didn't read, this is all in chapter 6. In verse number 10, you read about a man named Shemaiah. Shemaiah is a priest, and evidently he has befriended Nehemiah. But Sanballat goes to Shemaiah and says, Nehemiah is not listening to us. You need to go to him. He probably paid him off. You need to go to him, and you need to talk him into giving up on this. Because Shemaiah, somebody's going to assassinate him. Somebody's going to kill him. And so Nehemiah then has Shemaiah say to him, here's a safe place for you to run and hide. I will let you come into the temple, and I'll let you hide in the Holy of Holies. I'll protect you. Don't worry about everybody else. I'm just going to look after you. And Nehemiah doesn't give in to it. He knows, one, it would make him look like a coward. You know, leaders show up when the going gets tough. They don't run, they don't wilt, they don't go away. Leaders show up in those times. That's where leadership, I've heard people say character's made in a crisis. I don't believe that. I think character's revealed in a crisis. And here was the crisis. And so Nehemiah is very perceptive, because in verse 12 of chapter 6, he said, I came to realize that God had not sent him, even though he was a friend. When God put the call on my life to do what I'd done, I didn't grow up in a family with a lot of financial means. We never were hungry. We always had clothes. We always had a roof over our head. My dad was the hardest working guy in the world. But we weren't blessed financially to have a whole lot of money. And so naturally then that became a weakness for me, to worry about security, to worry about finances. Plus my mother reinforced it all the time by saying things like this: the poorhouse is just around the corner, Mr. Big Shot. And she would say there's a rainy day coming, scare me to death all the time. So I was called by God to do what I was doing. I was blessed to be in this church that became the second fastest growing Southern Baptist church in America out of 36,000 churches. And notoriety comes with that, and opportunities come with that. And I had a guy that I knew that was a friend that did a lot of work for me, helping me to understand finances and retirement and all these different kinds of things. And he came to me and said, I want you to come meet a man with me. And he said, he's got an opportunity he wants to talk to you about. And I said, okay. And I go and I meet with this guy and meet with both of them. We met at a hotel in downtown Atlanta. And the guy said to me, hey, I know about what ballpark salary that you make. I think it's about $28,000 a year or something. I was senior pastor. And he said, how much money would you like to make? What would you say if somebody said something like that? And you're making about that much money, so I just said $250,000 a year. He said, done. What? He said, done. He said, I'll send you a contract. He said, but by the time the year's up, you'll tear up the contract and you'll tell me you want to work on a different basis because you'll make a whole lot more money. Man. And by the way, this man was one of the most handsome men I've ever seen in my life. It was like January, and this dude had a tan. He had been down in the Bahamas. And it's my first bro crush right there. Man, I'm sitting there looking at this guy thinking, you're offering me this. And that's unbelievable. Nehemiah knew if I offer him protection, then maybe that's his weak spot. The devil knew for me it would be finances, because I worry about those kinds of things. I got the contract, prayed about it, made one of the hardest calls I ever had to make to my friend who had set all this up. Great friend. And just said, I can't do it. President, the CEO of that company called me. Hi. Do you want to guarantee more? I'll guarantee you more. And all I would have been doing was talking, speaking all over the country, getting people to invest. It's one of the hardest things I ever did in my life. Sometimes when people say they're speaking for God, they are not. Sometimes people say, well, I think this may be God's will for your life. You could change your whole paradigm. I mean, this guy was a priest. This guy was a friend of Nehemiah's, and he's giving him bad advice. You have to know how to discern those kinds of things, because they're always going to come. So I'm done. So here's the deal. How do you succeed in the face of distractions? Because we face them every day. Being defamed, in other words, having your motives challenged, and even outright danger. You have to have a compelling purpose. It's what set Nehemiah apart. He had a compelling purpose. In other words, he had a cause. You can call it a vision. You can call it a dream. You can call it an objective. You can call it a goal. It's something that pulls you toward that goal. It doesn't just drive you toward a goal, it draws you. I mean, it's just who you are. And until you get a compelling purpose for your life, you're just existing. So great lives are produced by a commitment to a great cause. When you settle on your great cause, then it gives you clear perspective. What do you say no to? And what do you say yes to? It makes you continually in prayer. So that prayer is not just something you tag on at the end of the day, or you get up in the morning and you say a prayer. Prayer becomes a continual thread in your life. You're praying, you're praying, you're praying. That results in courageous persistence. Just courageous persistence. I love Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good. You know, when you do good in life, there's a lot that comes with it. It's just a blessing. I mean, just when you do the right thing, you know, you have integrity. Going to do the right thing. I'm going to respond the right way. He says, if you don't become weary in doing good at the proper time, we'll reap a harvest if we don't give up. That's what I mean about Nehemiah. He would not quit. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. I love this season that we're coming in because it's Thanksgiving. And I love everything about Thanksgiving, holidays, and Christmas, and just everything. You guys can come on, grab this if you want to. Bobby. I love this season because it gives us a chance to do even more good. You know, it really does. I mean, think about it, folks. On this stage, with these screens and everything, there are going to be 33 choral groups, 44 choral groups. The hecklers are getting me from the audience this morning. 44 groups from our schools who are going to be on a church property, inside a church building, to present their Christmas programs. Think about that. You know why 15,000 people will be here over 2 days? Because they're coming to see their kids and their grandkids. And we'll have this place, we'll start decorating it all up tomorrow. I came over and put all the lights on the building on the outside myself. Y'all believe that, right? All that's done, this place will be so beautiful. And do you know, for a lot of those kids, this is the highlight? For the schools that are the Title I schools, we provide the buses. We provide food when they come. They get Chick-fil-A. It's a big deal to them. And there's going to be kids all over the place. And we're doing good. We're doing good. We're putting people in God's house. They're going to see that communion table. You ain't moving that communion table without a crane. You'll see that mission statement out there in the Great Hall. And we're doing good because we haven't fainted. We didn't faint during the pandemic. Take this the right way. We got woke in all the right ways. We said, we're going to be here for this community. Now that Great Hall, every week over 800 people were picking up groceries. 800. You invested $300,000 back into this community last year here, you invested that much money back. These grocery bags, all the things that we do, undies, Sundays, the only time we tell you we don't want anything gently worn. Undies, Sunday, we want you. You know what you're doing? You're helping to level the playing field for a lot of people. We're blessed. But we're not blessed for that to be the end result. We're blessed so that we can bless. And that's what you do with your giving here. See, you're not just giving to Piedmont. You're giving through Piedmont. We're a channel, not a chalice to gather it all up. We're a channel. Let's get it out there. Let's make a difference. That's what we do at Piedmont Church. And I'm proud of what we do. I'm so thankful for your generous spirit. I truly am. Thanksgiving season. Just think. Next Sunday, last Sunday before Thanksgiving, and we'll talk about this then, but we got the perfect song to end the morning with. It's about gratitude. It's about being thankful. It's about, if all I have is a hallelujah, I'm going to give you that hallelujah with all of my heart. And I know for some of you, the holidays are tough. That's why next Sunday afternoon, I want to spend time with you from 3:30 to 5. I want to spend time with you next week and talk to you about treasures in the dark. It's going to be an uplifting time. It's not going to be a sad time. Maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're going through grief. Maybe you're dealing with the holidays for the first time without a spouse or without a child. Or it can be any number of things. Or maybe you know someone that needs to be here. Daniel will tell you how, but you go to PiedmontChurch.tv and on events, register and come. Be with me Sunday afternoon. I'm so honored they asked me to come in and to speak on Sunday afternoon. Hey, I love you, church. We've got a great work we're doing in this community. We truly do. We don't have time to come down and be foolish and to get a bunch of arguments about dumb things. We got walls and bridges that we're building. And I can't thank you enough. Would you stand to your feet right now? As you do, maybe you've never accepted Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior. I'll meet you right down here in the front. If you want to come down, Marlon's right over here to my right. And I mean, we're there to talk to you about your salvation. If you need Jesus, if you need to be baptized, next week we're going to be baptizing. Some of you need to take that step of faith. Some of you today, you need that compelling vision, that cause, that goal. Why not humble yourself before the Lord and just say, God, this is what I need. Fill my heart. And I pray it in Jesus' name and through his blood. Amen.